This is Jim Williams with the 2013 Atlantic Hurricane Season end of season video. I have a lot of comments to make on this video, but before I do that, I want to thank two people that have helped with HurricaneCity.com over the years. Bill Phillips up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, helps a lot with the audio and the video presentations at Hurricane City. In fact, if you go back and look at the archives, there's been a lot of shows, a lot of recorded stuff, even during the off season, such as tornado touchdowns, snowstorms, things like that, that we like to record at Hurricane City on HurricaneCity.tv and put on the archives for subscribers and for viewers of Hurricane City. So thanks again to Bill Phillips, and I'll get into him a little bit more because we had plans for this hurricane season. Things didn't quite turn out the way we expected. And of course we have Chris Hollis in Tampa, Florida, and he runs TropicalAtlantic.com. He follows all the hurricane hunters and all the best performing models and all that type of stuff, and he has helped out with Hurricane City behind the scenes with some of the coding and some of the stuff behind the scenes that you may not really pay too much attention to, but it really helps keep Hurricane City going. So appreciate it and the help that comes from these two guys on a regular basis each and every hurricane season. All right, let's get on with what kind of a season was this. This was a really odd hurricane season. We had the least amount of hurricanes since 1982. And you have to ask, does this hurt or help in the whole scheme of things? It helps in the sense that nobody got killed this year. There might have actually there were some fatalities down in Mexico from rainfall and some injuries, but in the United States it was really an uneventful hurricane season. We had just Tropical Storm Andrea make landfall and then became extratropical, and that was about it. But you have to ask, you kind of outweigh it as a hurricane tracker on the internet and as maybe a vendor, somebody selling hurricane products, somebody tracking the hurricanes. There's plenty of storm chasers out there that were sitting home this year that did not get to chase hurricanes. So I've talked to a lot of these people. Everybody's kind of hurting in the financial aspect of things because, let's face it, when hurricanes make landfall and there's an active hurricane season, there's a lot of people using all these products on the internet, and when it's not and it's dead, there's money being lost. So it's kind of a double-edged thing. But one thing you will not see happen at Hurricane City, we're not going to come on and do shows and put text on the front page saying how wonderful it is that we had a slow hurricane season. All Hurricane City is here for is to let people know what's happening in the areas that are affected by hurricanes. So naturally, if there's not any hurricanes making landfall, we don't really have much to talk about. Of course, we track hurricanes at Hurricane City, but landfalls are what it's all about. That's why it's called Hurricane City. There's even a statistical breakdown, what areas get hit most versus other in the database. You know, what's the most likely time that your city is going to get hit by a hurricane in any Atlantic hurricane season. I do my city predictions, which I'll get to a little bit later. But the point is, the site's geared towards hurricane activity when hurricanes are making landfall. And with a season like this, naturally, it's been hurting. I do appreciate the people that have continued to donate to Hurricane City, the people that continue to subscribe to Hurricane City, and that's what keeps it going. But we're all hurting out there, and that's the bad side of having a slow hurricane season. Great for people that live in these areas, but bad for the people that make a living doing this stuff. So I will never come on Hurricane City and say it's a good thing that we had a slow hurricane season. Any more than I would say it's a great thing that there's a lot of hurricanes hitting because there's people dying, and that would be, you know what I mean. It's kind of either way you go about it, it's kind of the wrong thing to say, but that's the buzz behind the scenes as to what kind of a hurricane season this has been. Now, early this year in February, I stopped doing the weather and the media shows. Hurricane Cities, this is back from 1998, this picture you're looking at here. And this is me in Pompano, back when I started Hurricane City. This is in 1998, doing a broadcast on a dial-up connection, folks. I mean, think about this. This is back when you had to dial in with a modem and host the actual audience on your own computer through your dial-up connection. So I was doing this on like a 5 kbps connection and a very low bit rate. In other words, you sounded kind of like Mickey Mouse in a can of beans or something. That's how your voice sounds. It's all shushy and echoey and everything, and that was because of the low bit rate, and we could only handle maybe 10 or 15 viewers at a time on a dial-up connection. And then as the years went by and the internet connectivity got a little bit better, we started upgrading and then eventually used real audio products and started reaching larger audiences, up to 1,000 people. And then the networks came along with the great products such as Ustream and Livestream and Dustin TV, these products that allow you to stream your own live video at their expense, not at your own expense. So needless to say, there was a lot of years going on there at Hurricane City where there was a ton of money being spent because we could not produce, we had to produce these videos ourselves. The bandwidth, the ability to produce and have an outgoing signal to people outside before Livestream and Ustream came along. So that money's all gone, believe it or not. Everything people donated and bought subscriptions for, that money was all put to good use to pay for server fees and everything else. But there's still expenses involved with doing the shows. But the reason I stopped doing the shows back in the early part of this year is because of time constraints. I'm a business owner and I really don't have a lot of time to put into producing the shows. The technical nightmares that go along with producing the shows with audio levels and video and the cameras and the computers and the upgrades that are needed constantly to keep the shows on the air was just getting to be too much. And so if you look at this next graphic, this is basically a good idea of why I don't do the shows anymore. This is from Ustream from Hurricane Sandy last year, and if you look down at the flat line part of the graphic there, those would be your garden variety 24-hour-a-day broadcasts where we used to have the looping videos of storm chasers and documentaries and whatnot that would loop 24 hours a day. You might have 10, 15 viewers at most at any given time when you're not doing a show. But look here for Hurricane Sandy. When Sandy was approaching land in the northeastern United States, we had up to 60,000 viewers at a time on that live stream. That's a heck of a lot of viewers. And that's the kind of audience that you would like to see for the effort that's put into creating and producing these shows. So I decided, along with Bill Phillips, that maybe it's a good idea that we just stream for hurricane coverage, and do a really good presentation for people, and it's going to keep them coming back and using the products, and we can talk about not only what's going to be coming up in the hurricane warning shows, but also the products that are available on hurricanecity.com for research purposes and to find out the statistics on the models and the whole 9 yards of what's happening with the hurricane. So the intent this year was to do only the hurricane warning shows. Now here's Bill up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, in his studio. What we were going to do was, Bill was going to continue to more or less man the control panels at hurricanecity.tv, doing the live shows as hurricanes approached. He can show you radars, news from the affected areas, live news feeds, other storm chasers live feeds, weather observations, stuff like that, the current map showing where the current position of the hurricane is. And then he was going to patch me through from the road, and I was going to be out there in the hurricane actually feeding live video, not only from my dash cam, but from the remote camera that was going to be left somewhere on a beach, similar to like what Mark Sudduth does at hurricanetrack.com, but we've devised a box that's a little bit smaller, more compact, that's going to be strapped wherever we can find a place to strap it, where it would be just above the storm surge level, so you can record the storm surge but yet get out of harm's way and produce a live video via split screen for people to see what was happening in the affected areas. So I purchased a vehicle this year. Here's the Super F-250 utility truck with all the bells and whistles. We have floodlights on this thing. We're going to pack it full of supplies, chainsaws, emergency supplies, extra food, water, video filming equipment, everything you would need to get into these areas. Find a parking garage somewhere that's safe to film hurricane conditions, and then leave the remote cameras up there and stream it all live through hurricanecity.com.tv rather, through Bill Phillips in Virginia Beach. But this thing has been sitting here collecting dust for quite a long time, and this is the kind of hurricane season it's been. So next year we're going to have to blow off the dust, blow off the cobwebs on this thing, and get it back on the road. And yeah, I'm just kidding. I use this for business actually, but it's going to be used for hurricane tracking, for hurricane chasing in the future. So we hope to get that going next hurricane season. But this season started out really weird. We started out with a lot of tornado activity just before the hurricane season started, and we lost three very well-known hurricane chasers: Carl Young, Tim Samaras, and Paul Samaras' son. Tim did a lot of experimenting, putting devices in front of tornadoes to try to record pressure and wind and things like that. So these guys were snuffed out in a large multi-vortex tornado that was moving through Reno, Oklahoma. And, you know, it just seemed like with the decision to only chase this year, and with this happening with these storm chasers, it was almost, the season just started out really weird. I mean, you can decide you're going to chase and produce live video from the storm, and then this has to happen where you lose storm chasers like this. But they're going to be sorely missed. And then, of course, we had this, late in the season, we had this Typhoon Haiyan hitting the Philippines, the strongest, arguably the strongest system ever to make landfall anywhere on the globe, with winds about 195 miles an hour at landfall. That's arguable. But what happened was there were some storm chasers over there. iCyclone guys were there filming, and Jim Eds was filming. He's from Florida, and I know Jim Eds. He was he flew over there and got some amazing video of Typhoon Haiyan, and then he ended up on the Jay Leno show just recently on the 28th here. He was on the 27th, rather. He was on the Jay Leno show talking about his experience in Typhoon Haiyan. So we've gone through a lot of highs and lows this hurricane season. It's been a really crazy season to watch unfold. Of all the years I've been doing this, it's really been an odd hurricane season. But congratulations to Jim Eds for the publicity of getting in that storm and getting in and out safely and telling the story of that massive typhoon over there. All right, let's get to what the season brought this year. And if you look at the Atlantic Basin, first of all, what really stands out here is the Pacific. They outperformed us this year, and that really doesn't happen too frequently. The Pacific really cranked out a lot of storms this year. But look at the Atlantic over here. I mean, basically, basically, fish storms out in the open Atlantic. But there were two areas that were really affected this year, and that's the southwestern Gulf of Mexico and the northern Gulf of Mexico by a couple of tropical storms. But again, only Andrea made landfall in the United States, and there were a whole host of systems down in the southwest Caribbean. But the number one affected city in the Hurricane City database this year was Veracruz, Mexico, where we had two tropical storms, Barry and Fernan, and then there was another one that came in just north of there with hurricane strength that did not hit Veracruz. But that area definitely took the brunt of the hurricanes this Atlantic hurricane season. And here are my predictions for 2013, and this I released on a live video update, and the video is still available at Hurricane City. And this is a statistical scheme, so please, anybody that does not like the breakdown of return rates of hurricanes and that sort of thing, I'm sorry, but there's not really much meteorological phenomenon involved with my prediction scheme. It's basically in numbers. It's running numbers and statistics, and it is based on an active versus an inactive season. And the predictions were for an active season this year, so this was based on an active season. And you'll notice here that the most of the areas I predicted were up in the northern Gulf Coast and in South Florida, where there's a ticking time bomb going on because we haven't been affected since 2006. You could argue Faye did flirt with South Florida a little bit on the way into Central Florida, but it's been a lot of years since South Florida has been affected by a named storm. So these two areas definitely were overdue this hurricane season, and that was one of the main reasons why they were high up on my list. But if you look at the next map here, it's more detailed. And again, the high-risk areas are red on the map, and the blue areas were moderate risk, but none of these areas were affected this hurricane season. But I do have to say I had the right idea in mind despite these areas not getting directly impacted, and that was because of the two systems that were in the northern Gulf this year. Andrea, this was the storm that affected the only storm that affected the United States this year, but it became extratropical up in this region in here and then raced up the eastern seaboard. So all these areas are affected. In fact, we were not using extratropical systems in the database until just a few years ago. So this wouldn't have even been included for the east coast of the United States, but because we're using extratropical, now it's included. So basically what happened is 36 areas were affected mainly because of Tropical Storm Andrea. 36 areas out of 153 cities in the database. That comes out to about 23.5% of all the locations in the Atlantic Basin were affected by named storms this year. On average, you're usually going to get about 40% of the areas that are going to get affected. This year was only 23.5, and that's because most of them were turning out to sea or weakening by storm surge. Here's Tropical Storm Karen. This was late in early in October, and this system had all the markings of hitting all the areas that I had in my top 5. In fact, this would have knocked out about 3 out of my top 5 cities that could have been impacted. But wind shear was a big problem this hurricane season. That's why we didn't have a whole lot of powerful hurricanes. And here we had westerly and northwesterly wind shear just destroying the system, and it never was able to maintain tropical storm status as it headed into the northern Gulf Coast. So again, if you look at that map right there, and you look at that potential forecast track, a whole bunch of my cities would have been affected, and it would have knocked off my list. So basically, this is the first year that none of my cities were affected, none of my top 20 picks were affected by a named storm. That has never happened since in the last 10, 11 years that I've been doing this. And you can see my predictions in my past years on my predictions page, hurricanecity.com/predictions, and you can see all my track record of past seasons. So that's basically what it is. We had a relatively inactive season with the majority of the systems hitting Mexico. That was the most impacted area of the Atlantic Basin. Again, this is also, as far as the ACE is concerned, the accumulated cyclone energy, this is the lowest, the 5th lowest ACE value since 1950 at 31.14. So it's been a very quiet hurricane season compared to what would average out. And by the way, the hurricane hunters flew the least amount of hours of flying into tropical systems since 1966. So that tells you how slow things have been this hurricane season. So anyway, with that said, I'm glad it was a relatively safe hurricane season for everybody this year. On the other hand, a lot of the websites are suffering out there and need donations, and I know the economy isn't doing real good right now, but we're going to try to keep things going at Hurricane City despite the lack of funding lately, and we're going to keep it going, but we're only going to broadcast for hurricane landfalls in the Atlantic Basin. Now, the next video should be coming out in about a month or two, and I'll be breaking down the statistics of all the cities and islands and the ranking database for what areas get impacted most. And I imagine some of the Mexican cities are going to move up on the list due to all the tropical storms they had out there. But overall, a safe hurricane season. We'll have updates throughout the off-season, a few update videos on preparing for the 2014 Atlantic hurricane season. That's it for now. Thank you again for watching the video.